Thank you so much for joining us. It's 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and we all know what that means. Another riveting live stream for Behind Breaking Bond. Someone was missing last week. Where the heck were
I
you?
was missing. I was in Denver, Colorado, with the National Office of Victim Assistance Conference, talking about the issue of profiting from crime, victim advocacy, and all sorts of stuff. And Denver is a very interesting city, and I think our guest here, strangely and coincidentally, happened to also have been in Denver, Colorado, not at our conference, but at a conference of other sorts.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Lacey Hull, State Representative for House District 138, which is over in kind of the West Houston area, covers Spring Branch up to Jersey Village and down to Tanglewood.
This is your first run, your first office?
Yes, just had our first session, last year, and running for my second.
What made you decide to run?
Well, politics and government was always a passion of mine. It was my major in college. Becoming a mom really got me more motivated to get involved, and I was just a volunteer advocate and advocating for issues that I cared about, getting involved with campaigns that I believed in. And then when the guy before me decided to retire,
that was Dwayne Bohat?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he had the seat for about 18 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Great guy. And he decided to retire. And so there was this open seat and decided to go ahead and run. And it's been
What
great.
was it like when you decided I'm going to run? What was that feeling like?
Oh, it was crazy. I thought maybe I'd lost my mind.
But
it was
you
great.
probably did have people saying, do you really want to do that?
Yeah, and I mean, it was something that was kind of encouraged. Originally, it wasn't, running for office was never a goal of mine. I liked just doing the volunteer work. But it was, there was an opening, and
That's
really,
a pretty big race too, a state representative for your first time out.
Yes, and it was a 50-50 district, so it was a tough race. But we were able to hold on to the seat, and I'm glad that we did. And we had a great first session. So
what was it like campaigning? You've never done that.
Oh yeah, that was definitely very interesting. Now, I had volunteered for others, so I had block walked and stood at the polls for other candidates in the past. But doing it for yourself is definitely
That's a whole different thing,
yes, it's
right?
very different. So that was really interesting. But it's been a great experience.
What did you have to do to get your name out there? A lot of door knocking?
Oh yeah, a lot of door knocking, a lot of mail, TV. We did. If you can think of it, we did it.
Yeah.
So
your first session,
yes,
you had a bill passed for missing people.
Yes. It's called John and Joseph's Law. It has to do with missing persons and unidentified remains. There is a national database called NamUs that exists and costs nothing for states to use, but there is no requirement, or there wasn't in Texas, for it to be used. So the bill that we did required the use of NamUs for law enforcement and medical examiners or justice of the peace to input those missing persons cases and unidentified remains. And the goal of that is to then be able to match up these cases. I found out about this while I was block walking, my first time running, and I was block walking, knocking on doors, and I knocked on the door of a dad, David, who told me about his son who had been missing for 2 years. His name was John. And the very next day, he was going to Laredo to go exhume his body, who he had been missing for 2 years and was buried as a John Doe. And had everything been put in, had NamUs been used, he would have found him a lot sooner. His body was actually found 3 days after the missing persons report.
Sure.
So, and the goal with that also is to be able to catch criminals and these people.
I met David at a Texas.
Yes.
I met him at a Texas EquiSearch function.
I mean, that's a huge, it's a huge problem all over the country, but definitely in Houston. I mean, we're a big transient city, and people end up missing all the time.
All the time. David introduced me to a woman named Alice, who had a somewhat similar story about her dad, John, and he was missing for 12 years. And so between David's son, Joseph, and Alice's son, or dad, John, that's how the bill became John and Joseph's Law. But she looked for her dad for 12 years, even went to the Harris County morgue asking if there was anyone in there that matched the description. She had a picture of him. And even though his body was stored there for a couple years, they kept saying no. And so sometimes there's jurisdiction issues between like Houston and Harris County. It just kind of depends on the part of Texas you're in. But she searched for 12 years, and her dad was buried as an unidentified Hispanic male in the Hopper Cemetery here. So just these really sad, tragic stories. And again, criminals getting away with it because, and if these cases could have been solved sooner, if these unidentified person remains and the missing persons reports could have been matched up sooner, and people could have come forward, maybe they had some information, but instead it's these criminals are just getting away, and these heartbroken families have no closure.
What's it like for you to know that, I mean, you sponsored this bill, you made this become a law? I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yes, it was my biggest accomplishment this session. It was the one thing that I said, if I get nothing else done this session, I'm getting this done.
You had bipartisan support on
Yes,
this, right?
yes, and we worked very hard to make sure that we had bipartisan support, and my staff and I worked very hard along the way, even before the start of session, making sure the language was right, working with all of the stakeholders, the law enforcement agencies, medical examiners, and justice of the peace, to make sure that everyone was good and on board and how this would play out. And then when it was time for committee hearings, and we had David and Alice come and testify and tell the stories of their of Alice's dad and David's son, we got bipartisan support all the way through.
Any opposition on this, out of curiosity? I would expect not, but you never know.
Yeah.
The only thing that we hit was the time frame and the requirements for them to enter the data.
Yeah.
And so they just, the point is for the long-term missing. And so we weren't trying to overwhelm law enforcement with the short-term missing.
Was there like a grandfathered kind of a thing to it, or?
No, it's just for new cases, because right now, it would cost a lot of money, and which we just don't have to be able to go back and to
But at
do
least
that.
you've prevented it from happening in the future.
Yes. And that was, David and Alice, they have gone through the worst thing that anyone can imagine, and not knowing what happened to your loved one, and going so long trying to find them. And their whole thing was just to make sure that this didn't happen to anyone else.
Well,
When you think about it, I'm a firm believer in divine intervention, and things happen for reasons. Okay, the fact that you're knocking on someone's door, you have no idea who you're knocking.
No.
And because of that, because you won, history gets changed.
It's like it was meant to be. You were meant to knock on that door.
Yes,
and
I was meant to meet David, and he was meant to introduce me to Alice. And I went to the missing persons in Harris County Day a few months ago, and met more families who are searching for their loved ones. And I will say that we have had, since the bill became law and has been active, we have seen a tremendous amount of input and data being input in from law enforcement and everyone. So it's working, and these cases we have more input, so more cases are getting matched up. So it is working. And we're like, I think that Texas is now the 12th state. So hopefully all states catch on and do this, because what if someone from Texas goes missing
in another state? They don't do it.
Right. So it's something that we need all 50 states to.
I think that would be the absolute worst, right? Where, in my mind, that would be almost worse than losing a loved one, because you don't know.
Right.
And so you live the rest of your life with you've dealt with that situation a lot.
Someone who's worked with surviving family members of homicide, for more decades than I want to care to get into. It's that feeling of not knowing.
Yeah.
And I actually knew families whose son went missing, daughters went missing, they're presumed to be dead, but you don't know because there's no body found. And then all of a sudden, So yes, I think that would be.
And part of you is always there's going to be that little thought that they're going to walk in the door one day, or they're going to come back. I mean, that's just too difficult to give up on, unless someone is actually deceased and they're gone.
So you hit a grand slam on your first.
You did.
Yes, it was great. I'm so glad that
I bet that doesn't happen that often either, right?
I mean, that was a huge thing for Texas, and the fact that we got bipartisan support, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I'm glad
You
that
should be.
we worked really hard, and that the House and the Senate both, everyone heard it and heard the stories and the importance of it. So
I know you were there for a lot of the bond stuff.
yes,
I mean, what do you think happened there? Some things passed, some things didn't.
right. Well, the fact that we couldn't get, I mean, we got the Damon Allen Act, which is great, but we couldn't get that constitutional amendment, which we desperately needed. And the fact that we couldn't get that is just ridiculous to me. Why bail and crime and public safety has become a partisan issue is absolutely ridiculous. And when you talk to everyday people, especially in Harris County, no matter what side of the political spectrum they're on, everyone's sick of it.
Yeah.
And so why it's just ridiculous. It's like the Democrat Party politicized this issue. And so this constitutional amendment could not get enough support on the Democrat side to be able to get that 100 votes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the constitutional amendment basically would have allowed Texas voters, you, me, all of us
Right.
here, the ability to decide whether or not judges should have discretion. And that's a key word.
Right.
A key word is discretion. And even the judges that I talk to will say they need discretion,
Right.
because the only offense that they cannot by statute issue a bond is capital murder.
Right.
And that's not even happening in this day and age in
Yep.
Harris
Right.
County.
Exactly.
But all that would have done was let Texas voters decide
Yes.
whether this was a good thing or a bad thing.
Right.
And we couldn't even get it to where the voters could make a decision. It was extremely frustrating because I saw no downsides simply to give. It wasn't a mandate, judges could still if they wanted to,
Right.
but at least they would have that option of saying, you know what, I'm looking at your sheet here. It's not going to happen for you. I can give a no bond, and I'm going to do that. So we got to come back again this upcoming session. And I'm hoping, okay, and I've done this again for more centuries than I want to get into. So some of the bills that I've worked on, for whatever reasons, even though they make sense, they don't make sense because it took X amount of years. And I'll just give you one quick example. And you might not obviously remember this because this is going way back. We once had a statute of limitation for hit and run fatalities.
Yeah.
And I think you and I, because we probably covered these stories, but believe it or not, at one time you had 3 years in the state of Texas to solve a hit and run. And if 3 years went by and you didn't solve it, it was
You could say you did it and nothing
as I like
happened.
to
Yeah.
say, you could get hit by a bolt of lightning, come into law enforcement, do 10 Hail Marys and say, I did it. But it was after 3 years.
They
they'll
couldn't
say,
charge
son, you don't send. And which I thought was inane to have a time frame on. It took 6 years, 3 sessions
Yeah.
to remove the time frame.
But too, one thing, going back to, of course, the Constitution requires that everyone gets a bond. But we all have to remember that judges can say, gee, Randy Wallace, you're out on 4 bonds. I'm tired of looking at you. I'm going to revoke your bond and put you in jail, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that's
That's it.
what we're not seeing.
Yeah, and people get so caught up in that, and these judges, I can't do anything. My hands are tied. You're the judge. Your hands are not tied when you see somebody coming back to your court time and time again, and you just keep giving them another bond. You can say, no more. It looks like you've committed 6 alleged crimes, robberies, whatever, while you're out on bond. It's not safe for you to be out on bond. I'm revoking your bond.
Well, and as you and I have done this ad nauseum, when you look at the crime rates, particularly the violent crime rates, and especially homicide, and you look at the revolving door at the courthouse, it has played a significant role in the increasing crime rates because the numbers clearly show what we've been saying. And we did the story on the numbers a couple of weeks ago. When you look at the numbers of defendants who've been released on multiple bonds, who've gone to commit additional violent felony crimes, the numbers essentially have doubled
Yes.
in the last 4 years.
And again, this is something that began in 2000, pretty much 2019. You had new judges that were elected in 2018, and they took office in 2019. And this has nothing to do with being a Democrat or a Republican. All the new judges that came in are Democrats. They just are. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with being a Democrat or a Republican, but this is a race that everyone, if you are worried about crime in this town and public safety, when you go vote in November, you need to look at these the judge races closely, and don't look at it from a standpoint of, well, I'm a Democrat, so I'm voting for this person, or I'm a Republican because I'm voting for this person. And I'll say it again, I've said it a million times, every single person that's running for a criminal district court judge, you can sit next to me just like this young lady is, and you can say whatever you want to. You can, this is not to ask you a bunch of questions. It's your opportunity to say what you have to say.
And you can tell that Randy Wallace has really drank a lot of no bond, axe grinding coffee. You can really see
This is why I'm
effects.
acting up. I drank too much of this coffee. Forget Starbucks. This is what you do. No, seriously, this is open to everyone. Before you know it, the election is going to be here, and we want to give everybody an opportunity to say what they want to say. You know, we take hits all the time on social media. I don't care about that, but I just want to make it clear to everybody, if I'm wrong, you have a different opinion, you can come on here and sit here and say that, and I'm not going to say a word, and neither is he.
Maybe.
Well,
somebody might say that. So let me ask Mr. Representative Hall. So next session, how do you decide what issues you want to pursue and what you don't? What's the thought process?
Well, I know that I'm going to be doing more on the missing persons and the unidentified remains. I know we're going to be doing more on that. So some of it just depends. I mean, for each member, it's the committees that you're on, the issues that you're passionate about. So it's really just going to depend. And like this missing persons, unidentified remains issue, I didn't even know about. I just knocked on David's door and found out, and now I'm trying to do everything I can to.
What do you hear from your constituents? I mean, are people really concerned a lot about crime right now?
Oh, yes, definitely. And again, like I said earlier, it's both sides. It's everyone. Crime and public safety and this bail issue should not be partisan. It absolutely should not be. And I hope that next session we can come back, and I hope that my Democrat colleagues will realize that, and that we can get a constitutional amendment. Because right now, you know, the judges, the Damon Allen Act, they're supposed to look at and do a risk assessment and all of that, but it's a may, it's not a shall.
Right, yeah.
The bill is a may, so then they may deny bail. Well, they're not. And so, and obviously in the Constitution, it talks about who can be denied bail for what crimes and all of that. So that's where the change has to be made. And the Damon Allen Act has done a little bit, but these judges in Harris County don't seem to care.
Right.
And this November, the judge races are so crucial. And like you said, people really need to be paying attention to who they're voting for these judges, and going all the way down the ballot and making sure that they are getting all of these judges, and then they're voting for all of them.
Well, and two Democrats, State Senator John Whitmire, who's running for mayor, and the DA Kim Ogg, they've both been very vocal about, hey, this is what's fueling crime in our town. This is why we're seeing a big increase, right?
So is the sheriff as well. So
yes, thank you.
And a hodgepodge of other elected officials.
Yeah.
And like Representative Hall said, I've been doing this aeons, and I've never seen public safety become so partisan. I don't grasp the concept of it, because the victims' families that I work with, none of them asked or cared if they were Republican, Democrat, Independent, or whatever they were.
Well, And remember too, Mayor Sylvester Turner, another Democrat, last summer, he had a press conference and he basically stood there and said, no one needs to be out on 6, 7, 8 felony bonds. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so like I said, crime is going to be the number one issue in this upcoming election. The upcoming election is going to be before you even know it.
Right.
You blink, it's just a couple months away. So like you and I have said, we're encouraging everyone to get educated who the candidates are, because they're the ones who eventually will represent you, not just in the Capitol, but all across the country as well. Because more specifically, local elections, quite frankly, matter more than your national election.
And
That's
we-
my
Yeah.
perspective.
And you're right. And we will have, any candidate that wants to come on here, judicial candidate, is more than welcome. We had quite a few before the primary that came on here, some of them 2 or 3 times. And as you probably already
You
know,
think they came on for the coffee.
they wanted the coffee.
That's what it was. Yes.
The multiple ones.
They wanted the
probably. Let me ask Representative Holt. So I'm actually a constituent of yours. So that gives me a little weight and pull. Right? So if I came to you, and this is just a hypothetical, if I came to you and said, you know, we have a sex offender registry, and that was a bill I worked on again decades ago, you know, what about kind of doing one for like child abuse or something like that? You know? So
Is that possible?
how,
It would be possible. I sit on the Human Services Committee, so we deal with CPS and
Yeah.
all of that. Well, I will say one of the things that we do see with that is we have these 2 extreme situations within CPS, and we have families who are being ripped apart and children taken from perfectly loving homes, and they are being accused of child abuse when they absolutely did not.
Right.
And so that we have a major problem with that. We also have a problem with kids being left in really dangerous situations when they should have been taken.
Yeah.
So it's a possibility. The only concern would be, again, those families who didn't actually.
You'd have to be like convicted. Yeah.
It would be.
Right. It couldn't just be
Right.
based on a.
Yeah, it would actually be like a conviction.
And you know what I would like to see become a huge animal? Don't say anything. It's like something where you'd have like a registry for people that were like animal cruelty. Like if you were
yes.
convicted of animal cruelty, that you would be on some sort of registry.
Well, and we know that especially people that you look at their history, violent crimes, and so, especially when you're looking at some of these mass shootings and all that,
Serial
they have a history
Yes.
of
Killing animals.
killing animals. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Okay, let me ask our Cracker Jack producer, since both Randy and I pitched, you know, actual legislative ideas. Who do you think's actually gonna, you know?
He's going to pick you. You got you better than me. That
Yes.
is so unfair.
I'm doing a viewer poll right now.
Oh, you know, Randy's, people are already picking on Randy. Oh, don't talk to him. So they're probably to come to you.
You won. Hey, thank you all so much for joining us.
We have something tonight?
Yes, be sure to watch tonight's Breaking Bond at 9. We're taking a look at some alleged catalytic converter thefts, and what we found will probably make you a little mad. So be sure to tune in at 9 o'clock. This is on our YouTube channel. If you watched us live, and please pass the word on to other folks that you know. You can watch all the Behind Breaking Bond live streams on Fox 26's YouTube channel, as well as the Breaking Bond segments. Thank you for watching, and thank you for, wait a minute.
Oh,
Raymond.
he's pointing a finger at me.
You've done something now.
Right.
Have the numbers gone up from 179?
It's 180 right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, 180.
Which,
And
yeah,
and
that's,
again, that's just what we know. So the
Right.
180 people that we've documented at CrimeStoppers that have been murdered, albeit allegedly by defendants released on multiple felony bonds, a felony PR bond, or they were on bond and they forfeited their bond.
you could honestly say that that's 180 Harris County residents who should be among us today.
And that's just since a couple of years.
Basically, yeah, I started going back to 2018, but of the 180, over 130 since 2020.
And,
So
and
it's a trend.
I know we said this, but you have to remember, it's what we know. And in a situation like this, you figure what you don't know is more than likely going to outnumber what you do know. Am I right?
What a great saying. I mean, that's
You write that down.
that is quotable.
I need to
right
remember
here.
that.
Put that. That is, I mean, famous quotes by TV reporters for 200
After 32 years, I finally did
You
it, right?
finally
I
have it.
finally said something memorable.
Without copying him.
Right. Yeah,
That's
the
true.
music, I said that first.
You said that was what you said. I said one bond per customer, and you started.
Yeah, I stole like 2 or 3 things from you now. Now you're going to steal what I just said.
It's only fair, right?
Right. Hey, thank you so much, and keep the faith and keep watching. Bye.
Thank you.